welcome to CoProduce Care. Today we are very excited to have with us this interim CEO of Skills for Care, Andy Tilden. And that is, of course, one of our CoProduce Care chats that we're having today. So without further ado, we'll introduce Andy. If you could introduce yourself, welcome, and tell us a little bit about you, what you do at Skills for Care, and how you got into the care industry.
Okay, yeah, so I'm the interim CEO. Been the interim CEO in Skills for Care since March and probably expected to be the interim CEO until March 2020. We're recruiting for the CEO at the moment.
Okay.
I will revert back to being a director, so I'm a director in Skills for Care. Mm-hmm. Been in Skills for Care for 20 odd years. Prior to that, I was working in a charity in Bristol. Came to Bristol in the 80s, trained as a social worker, so worked in child protection and juvenile justice around the Bristol area. Prior to that, I was a lecturer. Worked in the NHS in Bristol, in hospitals, learning disability long stay hospitals in Bristol. Okay. And before that I worked in childcare. So I left school, trained as a teacher, didn't really fancy teaching, but actually enjoyed working with those kids that had some difficulties, some negative experiences, and that led me to go into childcare and then into social work, and then here I am as a Kent boy living and working in the Bristol area. My job's a national job, so it takes me all over the country, but I absolutely welcome coming here because it's only an hour away from where I live.
Perfect, that's handy, isn't it? Not too much travel, saving the planet. So I was interested in, what did you lecture?
Health and social care.
So it was, okay, brilliant.
It was, so when I was a social worker, they didn't have any professionals delivering on the programme, so they knew I was a teacher, so they asked me to come in and do some evening classes when I was working as a social worker, and then a job became available to head up a couple of the programmes, so and that was in Weston-super-Mare.
Brilliant. So thanks for that, Andy. Just go through how we're going to do the CoProduce Care Chats. So we've gone out and we've asked a few people who follow us, who we know through our networks, a few questions. What would they like to ask the CEO of Skills for Care? So most of the questions are coming from our engagement with people. And then at the end, we'll have a few prickly questions about health and social care, and those are our cactus questions, hence why we have a cactus on the table. It's not totally random. So we'll go straight in with one of the questions that we had a few questions from a trainer. So this is someone who trains staff, and she works in a health and social care organisation, and she wanted to learn a little bit about more about what you thought of the mandatory training of autism and learning disabilities for all people who work in health and social care, so all the staff. Do you feel that would benefit the sector as a whole? And what kind of benefit would that have, do you think?
Yeah, the straight answer is yes. So there's 1.48 million adult social care workers in social care working in England, working in 18,500 separate organisations. Those organisations are not really connected. The only thing that connects them is largely CQC, is the regulatory body, and the requirements to be a regulated service. And so trying to get consistency across that workforce, across those organisations, is difficult. Our role, as funded largely by the Department for Health and Social Care, is to try and assist that. We need a nudge, the sector needs a nudge and needs some support, and so the piloting of mandatory training and exploring that we see as a welcome way forward.
Brilliant, yeah. And I want to talk a little bit about sort of what Skills for Care does and how it's its role within the sector, because you've got skills for care, which is based around social care, and then you've got skills for health, which is more supporting the NHS staff workforce. So I think for people maybe new to the organisation, understanding what it does and what it represents, might be useful to understand where skills for care came from and what it does at the moment. What's its impact?
Sure. And that is a good question, and it's a question we get asked all the time. So Skills for Health and Skills for Care were set up about 20 years ago when the government divided the UK up into 25 sectors. Okay. So there was a motor vehicle maintenance sector, there was a hair and beauty sector, there was a catering, hospitality sector, there was a sector for health, skills for health, and a sector for social care, skills for care. Since then, there have been successive governments that have moved away from that notion of sector skills councils, but for reasons of branding, Skills for Cares maintains its name. Skills for Health has moved and has got some different names now, but still trades aspects of it under Skills for Health. That's my understanding. Okay. So we're still largely funded by Department for Health and Social Care. Over 3/4 of our funding comes from government, and we're the workforce delivery body for social care, delivering the policy projects that the government and the ministers want us to deliver. So one of them you just mentioned around learning disability and autism will be a piece of work that we're expecting to take forward in the next financial year. So when we get a new government, and we're in an election period at the moment, they'll be setting out a work programme, and we'll work with the government to deliver that work programme across the sector.
So there's like a policy side, an advisory side that Skills for Care has for the government. But the way that I know or use Skills for Care is through its website and its support for registered managers and inputting data into the national minimum data set for social care, which has changed now. So could you maybe give us a bit of an idea of all the stuff that it does for the sector and it supports its managers?
And I'll get told off if I didn't say it's called the ASCWDS,
the
Adult Social Care Workforce Development.
That's it.
So Skills for Care advises the government on specifically civil servants that work with us on aspects of workforce issues, and that advice comes from our area teams. Comes from our natural information line. We have a workforce development forum made up of key stakeholder groups, including people who receive care and support and carers as well. And they would talk to us about what are the key workforce issues that need to be addressed. Bearing in mind that social care is made up of 18,500 separate care organisations, and I think of those care organisations like corner shops. Most of them are small, medium enterprises, and they're very good at doing what they're doing. But in order to get some consistency and coherency, we feel there's a need to bind them together. So our role is to listen and learn what the sector's wanting and needing, to talk to government about that. And then for government to come back and say, okay, well, we'd like you to work in this area and that area. The National Minimum Data Set, and now the Ask WDS, was set up because 15 or so years ago, social care was a desert. We didn't know anything about social care. We just didn't know turnovers, vacancy, what people were paid, where workers were, some of the key metrics. And in order to argue with government and a whole range of government departments that this is a valid sector that's vital for England, vital for the UK, we needed some data. So we've developed the National Minimum Data Set and now the Ask WDS, which actually helps us and helps government, but also the dashboards that can be created will help individual employers as well see how their business compares to other businesses across the piece and particularly locally.
Yeah, I think that's a really powerful piece actually, because for us there was definitely kind of like a carrot and stick situation where you got a little bit of funding support for what was the common induction standards back in the day, which now the care certificate, if you completed the NMDS, which is now the adult social care workforce
data set.
That's fine. So that really helps. But one of the things that somebody mentioned to me earlier was that the funding for that isn't as strong as it used to be. So I wonder if, I mean, obviously there's funding pressures everywhere, but will that affect the quality of the data if people aren't as incentivized to hand their data over to Skills for Care?
It's a great question, and it's a question we ask ourselves all the time. So that funding was always seen as a nudge. The two are separate. So there is the Workforce Development Fund, and there's the data set.
Okay.
In order to give people a nudge for those that couldn't see some of the benefits for completing the data set, we've associated the two together. That fund by and large hasn't changed over the years, but the workforce has grown over the years. And requirements for learning and development have grown over the years. So, for example, when I first started, there was no talk of digital, whereas now, we're expecting our workers to be fairly digital savvy. So there's more. People have got more to learn than I first started as a care worker. The message that we get in terms of where the Workforce Development Fund should go comes very much from government. So we'll let government know we think these are the key areas. Government will come back and say, well, we need to push in this area, we need to push in that area. So we'll advise the government, but ultimately it's in their gift to tell us where it should go.
Yeah. Great. So one of the other questions we had is, what do you think about sector development? So there's also some talk around registration for care workers. Do you think that would be a good idea? Because I think the health sector, you've got nurses registered, there's more professionals that are registered. Do we bring that into social care more? Do you think that would be a good idea? Does Skills for Care think that's a good idea?
Okay, well, I'll answer for myself,
okay.
And I'll then say what Skills for Care's view has been. And I'll try not to give a politician's answer. I suppose my starting point is we need to value the social care workforce more than it's valued at the moment. If you shut your eyes and thought about NHS workers, you're more likely to get a warm, fuzzy feeling. If you shut your eyes and thought about social care workers, and perhaps not yourself because you're in the sector, sometimes we don't really know what that's about. So we need to recognise, reward, value the workforce. I see the work that workers do, and it's very skilled, emotionally challenging, great opportunities, but can be a difficult job. So I asked myself the question. I used to be a social worker. I'm not registered, so can't use that. Do we think registration is right for nurses? Do we think it's right for occupational therapists? Do we think it's right for social workers? If the answer is yes, I don't know why we think differently for home care workers or people supporting people with dementia or learning disability or autism or drug and alcohol. I don't really see the difference. What the wraparound around registration is, there's a definition of a curriculum, what people need to know and to be able to do, and there's a sense of community, a sense of value. You're part of something. Your workers are part of your organisation. If you take NHS workers, and I have a daughter who's a nurse in one hospital and another daughter who's an occupational therapist in another, they're still part of the same gang. They work for the NHS. We haven't got that in social care.
Yeah.
And it's my view that what's needed is something to tie them in. The other three countries, Northern Ireland, Scotland and Wales, are looking at regulation.
Okay.
Can't come on its own. There's clearly a financial issue, and there would need to be some detailed work.
Yeah.
But our view is that would go quite a long way to answering some of the problems that the sector's facing. And that's a view that the Workforce Development Forum and that Skills for Care have put to successive governments. It's not a party political thing on a number of occasions.
Yeah, I think it's definitely something to think about and consider, because from talking to other managers and people in social care, I think the idea is on the ground is quite a novel, new one. I think it's been discussed in certain circles and as a policy issue or consideration, but it's quite new thinking about how it would affect is organisations on the ground. You know, like you say, there'd be more paperwork maybe, and what does registration mean? What does it look like? Is there going to be funding for it? So, but I think separating the practical side out and just thinking, actually, is it just a good idea to value our workers like we do in health?
Yeah, I mean, if I can,
it's really interesting.
I'm just give a slightly different example. So one of my nearest towns is Weston-super-Mare. On that seafront there, if you wanted to go to a nightclub, you go in a taxi and the taxi driver's licensed. Before you get into the nightclub, you've got somebody who's on door security and they're licensed. Can't be a taxi driver and can't be door security unless those workers are licensed. 3 doors along the road, you can go into a home for older people. Workers there don't need to be licensed. And it kind of, for me, sort of says something, really.
Yeah. That's a really good way of putting it. There's so much that we take for granted in that licence.
Yeah, and to play devil's advocate, to be fair, there are some fantastic people who work in care where the thought of regulation and registration may be off-putting as well. So I wouldn't say it's a ready solution without its difficulties. We clearly need to explore and to learn as to the motivations of people. And what we wouldn't want to do is to put a bar into recruitment that means we make it even harder for people to consider social care as a valid career. We want people to come into social care, but we want people to feel valued and supported and part of something. And my view that regulation is a key part that could contribute.
And it's interesting because we've got the CQC, we've got health and safety, we've got so much regulation anyway that this almost probably potentially for an industry that's used to this type of way of being regulated or registered in other areas would not be as so much of a big ask as it might seem on the outset. So another question we had was, in the CQC did a state of care. I think that's the actual title of it, but it does every year. It looks at the adult care industry, and it looks at how it's performing on different things. One of the things it was quite keen on was the idea of one provider who worked with the NHS, and they created like a career ladder that started in social care and went all the way through to NHS. So, do you think that might be a good way in terms of the workforce and thinking about, how we create a career ladder that doesn't just stop at social care?
Yeah, I absolutely do. There are some implications about that. So at the moment, and I think my data people say to make sure I use the term heavily caveated, our figures show about 14% of social care staff move on into the NHS. I moved on into the NHS. I think it's absolutely valid for workers who've achieved their potential in the organisation they work in, and bearing in mind most are small, medium enterprises, if they're looking for career development, that workplace can't often provide that because it's a small workplace. So you go to the next step up, and in some parts of the country, the next step up is the local hospital. That's the anchor institution in that area. And I see it very valid for individuals who come into social care to work to further their career going into the NHS. And I see it as very beneficial for the NHS NHS to have people with a social care background and seeing people as whole people and not a condition or an illness to move into the health service. However, employers, I think, will struggle if they see that they're spending their learning and development on their staff and then their staff go one way into the health service. So if we acknowledge there is this talent pipeline between social care and health, we need to think about how can health keep that talent pipeline going. So I'm really interested to explore what contribution could a hospital trust make around, I don't know, their finance department, their marketing and comms department, their HR department. How could they support that care service to become, in the eyes of a local community, a great place to work, so they can attract people to come in who then you can get this throughput of workforce. It won't work if it's one way.
Yeah.
So we've got the people plan, the NHS people plan at the moment being developed, fantastic and great and very supportive of that. If you make the NHS an even better place to work, and I want it to be an even better place to work, there's a feeling that that tide will continue. So we need to think about the other end.
That's really interesting, because one of the cactus questions that we've had before for another interview, we asked, do you think that the NHS still social care staff? Which is the worry, I think, for some providers with the idea of working with the NHS, could be potentially, and seeing people drain out to another, and then once they're gone, that's it, because it's a totally different system. So another one of the questions that we had was, so Skills for Care provides support for managers, registered managers. There's quite a lot on the site and support and networks. And I think there's even a Facebook group that people can join once they're registered with Skills for Care. One person wanted to know, could we do the same for care coordinators? So for anyone who doesn't know, care coordinator is someone who would help coordinate care visits, would be the liaison between people receiving care and people who are delivering the care. And sometimes on the career ladder to management, that is one of the roles that people have. So the question is, could we do what we do for registered managers in Skills for Care for care coordinators as well?
Well, we'll certainly look at it. The straight answer is we want to assist that pipeline between a care worker going through into management. Leadership in social care is crucial, and management as well, two separate things, but it is crucial as well, and we want to facilitate that journey. The reason why we've got a focus on registered managers is we can see and the phrase I use is the small big. So what small amount of workforce can achieve big gains, and so we've got a big focus on the 21,000 registered managers to make sure we've got support to offer them the kind of relevant leadership and management they require. As we progress through that group of folk, and bearing in mind there's a turnover all the time, we can look at our other staff groups. So I'll take that request back. We'll have a look at it, and we'll put it back to the government, and just to see what their view is about the coordinator role.
Great, that would be really useful. Thank you. And there was another question about the iCare Ambassador scheme that Skills for Care runs. Maybe you could just explain to us what it is and how people can get involved if they want to.
Sure. So, it's probably about 30 or 40 years ago was the last time I worked in direct care. I'm often asked to go and talk to groups of people about what it's like working in care and the experiences. And quite frankly, I'm talking 30, 40 years ago, I might be listening to people's experiences, but it's not the same. So the iCare Ambassador scheme, quite simply, is a group of real workers doing real work in adult social care, who for sessions will go into schools and colleges and speak to other groups about what work is really about, what the realities are of working in care. And these are people who are very able to articulate the fantastic opportunities and the great experiences, and obviously confidentiality dependent, and also talk about some of the challenges as well. And so around the country, we've got a whole bunch of these iCare schemes, and the simplest way is for the people who've asked those questions to have a look at our website, and perhaps we can send you some details, so when this goes out you've got the details, and you can look and you can apply to that particular scheme to either receive ambassadors, because you want somebody to come along to talk to you about what life's like working in care, to get the real kind of view, or to apply to be an ambassador as well.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting scheme, and we will put the links to it on the description of this video anyway, so people can find out more. And one of the things I like about it is I think for people who are working in care on the ground, to then see that their experiences and their voices are really valued in part of the whole recruitment story is almost like a personal development thing. And I don't know, is there any support for people in terms of guidance on how to do that sort of
absolutely. This is not something we just expect people will be able to do. So there's a lot of support, and as you intimate, there's a lot of kudos as well about being an ambassador, and quite rightly, because you're loving working in your profession, and you've got the opportunity to talk about that to other people, to encourage others to come into the into the profession, and we need to acknowledge and support that.
Yeah, brilliant. So one of the things we'll come on to talking about is the annual report that you do on the care workforce sector. But Skills for Care it has a lot of data, it has a lot of information, and it also works on policy, like you've mentioned before. So the question is, could Skills for Care provide policy guidance for managers who need support with developing new policies?
Well, could we?
Could you?
Yes, we could.
Oh, yeah.
I've not picked up through our networks that that's been an issue. Many, I think it's about half of the regulated providers are members of trade organisations, and trade organisations can certainly help with that process as well. As ever with these things, we'll kind of listen and reflect, and if this is an issue that's coming up, it's something that we certainly will look at, and certainly go back to government and say this is an area of need. So an obvious recent one was around GDPR, and we put quite a lot of information out to support services around GDPR, as indeed did trade organisations to support their members as well. And one of the things about working in care is often we have brilliant people who are managers and who kind of lead care services. They might be carers by background, and so they may not be as totally knowledgeable around certain policies around HR and the like. So it is something that we will look at.
Yeah, I think maybe it could be potentially a good place to start, because there is so much information out there. Care associations are really, really helpful, but thinking about more people using PAs and just being outside of those associations, potentially, it would make sense, I suppose, if that is an issue. I mean, that's only one question for one person, for maybe consideration.
Yeah, and we've certainly got a lot of guidance and support for individual employers who recruit their own staff. Absolutely.
Yeah, and there's a lot on values-based recruitment, and there is a database of information to support registered managers and providers that Skills for Care has.
One of the challenges, though, and I think you've referred to it, is there is so much stuff out there.
Yeah.
And we know through behavioural economics is if you produce a lot of stuff, it's hard to make choices. If you go to a restaurant and there's 40 main meals to choose from, it'll take you longer than if there's 4, and you'll pick it quite quickly.
Yeah.
And we know, and you'll know from looking at our website, it's big and there's lots of things there. So we're constantly looking at how can we make it easier, how can we point people in the right direction on our website. And this is something we're constantly asking people about, and we need to order things in different ways to make that complex world out there seem far more simple.
Yeah. One thing that you have, I think, done in making things a little bit simpler is what you represented in your State of Adult Social Care Sector and Workforce report. So there's lots of infographics there, lots of information. I think it's over 100 pages. So I think, can we go on to talking a little bit about what's in there, because there's a lot in there. So anyone who's new to this, it's a report that Skills for Care have been doing, I think, for 10 years now. And we'll put a link in the description of this video, but this is what it looks like. This is the hard copy. And this is one I got offline, slightly different, but you'll find it. We'll put the link, so that won't be a problem. Different picture on the front. So you've been collecting all this data. You've used the old NMDS to help with this, now the ASC WDS. What would you say? I mean, you've probably been involved in the development of the reports, and nothing's a surprise to you, but people maybe not so familiar with the social care workforce. What are the things or the insights that stood out for you, or which might seem quite surprising for anyone reading the report?
You're right, and because we live and breathe the sector, sometimes we miss what might be seen as quite obvious outside. I think seeing the vacancy rates, 120 odd thousand vacancies at any given time, seeing the pay levels for workers who are skilled, and there's been a lot of debate out there in the media about whether social care is a skilled or not. I defy anyone to do a shift and say at the end of it, this is not a skilled job. So I think the levels that we pay people to look after people or to work with people receiving care and support, and the vacancy rates would be the two standout issues.
Yeah, I agree. And some other stats that I kind of made a note of. So there's 18,500 organisations, 1.6, just over 1.6 million jobs, 1.1 or just over million people working in social care. And actually that quite a few people are on permanent contracts, but the people who are on variable or 0-hour contracts, people who are working in home care, because the sector is just full of so many different organisations, isn't it? And this breaks it down really, really nicely. So anyone interested in data and insights is worth a read, really. One thing I was wondering is how well this data links up with CQC data, so Care Quality Commissioner, the regulator for health and social care. Because a director of a care organisation asked me to make the point that we're asked to give a lot of information to CQC, and we're giving some information to Skills for Care. Is there any way of joining the two, or maybe you work with care?
Absolutely, and that's the intention. So when the National Minimum Data Set was set up, it was set up, we're looking at what's the data that those bodies need, and CQC is very much part of that process, and CQC continues to be very much part of this process. So I'd be interested to hear where, from the experience of the person who asked that question, where data isn't.
I think it was, when providers have to give in a provider information, it's PIR, I can't remember what the R stands for, report maybe, to the Care Quality Commission. So just before they come for an inspection, they send out a link to a web link. You have to answer those questions about your organisation, the age range of the workforce, the training that you provided them, numbers of full-time, part-time, and then I think what the NMDS used to do is ask for similar information. I think they were thinking whether there was some talk of joining those two, and we were thinking whether that's still going to happen. But that's very processy for one sector, one part of data collection. But I think from a provider point of view, filling in the two different online forms, which are very similar for two different organisations that potentially work together, would be quite an interesting thing to join up and kind of not have to double up on the work.
Yeah, and I'm probably not on top of where we are with that as much as I should be. So that's something I'm definitely going to take away from here and have a look at that. The aim is to make it simple, and the mantra we always used to use is fill it in once and use it many times. Which, care's difficult enough. We don't want bureaucracy, undue bureaucracy to get in the way.
Yeah. I think they were doing that, or are going to do that soon, so it might be something that's in the works anyway. Another thing that came up was that the report shows that each worker loses around about 4.86 days a year, which amounts to 6.94 million days of work lost to sickness. Just thinking about staff well-being in social care, how important do you think that is? And is Skills for Care maybe doing something to promote staff well-being?
Yes, we are. We've got quite big work streams around resilience and well-being, and also trying to help registered managers recognise that workforce is the greatest asset that they have, and the focus on recruitment is absolutely great, but we always talk about retention first, and what are the issues that mean you've got to recruit all the time. So if somebody comes to us and say, well, I'd like some apprentices, that's absolutely great. Why do you want apprentices? What's the problem? And we need to look at it as a whole, really. So absolutely, it's a challenging, difficult environment, and we need to focus on well-being.
Yeah. So before we go on to the cactus questions, I just wanted to find out from you what you thought providers could do to support Skills for Care. Is there anything that we could do to help understand it or promote it or get involved in any way?
Absolutely. I think there's a lot. So on a local area, we have locality managers and we have area teams, and they'll often have lots of events and lots of sessions for providers locally. So you get a chance to meet the locality managers and the head of area, the Southwest head of areas up in this particular part of the country. Or
yeah. So sorry to interrupt you. Just for people who don't understand what local area managers, locality manager is. Is any care provider, do they have to register in order to access? Can they ask them questions at any point?
Absolutely. So we've split England up into 6 areas, and so in the southwest we have a head of area for the southwest, and across the local authorities we have locality managers that cover different areas. And obviously I know this is going to go out hopefully across England, so there will be locality managers, and so on our website, and again we can put the link on the website, we've got details of who our locality managers are, so people can see who their locality managers are. So there's a way in which you can kind of contact them. Our coverage through our e-news and our websites and our various face-to-face events is very good, but a sector of 18,500, we haven't covered everybody. Our engagement isn't as good with all 18,500 as we'd like, and so one of the things I'd encourage employers to do is to spread the offer from Skills for Care, what's available. So we still come across people who don't know we've got funds available for the Workforce Development Fund, or don't know we've got support available. Often it's support that's funded by Department for Health, Social Care. I mean, I never say it's free, because the reality is for you to actually go to something, it costs time and a resource to actually go. But we've got funding available, and lots of people still don't know about that. So one of the things I'm always encouraging people to do is to kind of spread the Skills for Care world with your contacts as well.
Yeah, I think it's really helpful because there's a lot out there, and unless you know about it, then you can't access it. And the idea of having a single point of contact, you could just email the locality manager and say, I'm looking for this, I'm sure that Skills for Care has it, do you know? And I know as a registered manager, you can also get access to the newsletters, and I find them really useful because you can just flick through and then find out what events there are, whether it's about values-based recruitment or anything that's going out of funding, or the workforce development policies. Whatever. It's all in there as well, so that's really useful. Okay, that's helpful. Thank you. So now we're going to go on to our cactus questions, and anyone who doesn't know what our cactus questions are, this is our resident cactus. It's very cringy, but it's prickly questions about social care. It could be health and social care, but we'll focus on social care today. So one of the questions that we've had is, we've talked about at the beginning about Skills for Care and Skills for Health. And it's often said that Skills for Health has disproportionately a lot more funding than Skills for Care, even though the workforce is quite similar. Do you feel that there is this disparity is a result of people not properly valuing social care as, on the same par as health? And is that a real problem?
Well, there's no doubt that the health workforce budget is much larger than the social care budget. That's partly down to the way that health is conceived as through the NHS, and how social care is conceived through local authorities. So you can't quite compare like for like with the money that we receive as Skills for Care and Health Education England receive, for example, as the kind of workforce body for the health sector. However, I think it's pretty much undisputed that health is easily more understood than social care, and often, sadly, people's experience in the media of social care is often when something's gone wrong. Front page newspaper headline, front page news headline when something's gone wrong. So going back to one of my previous answers, we know we've got more to do to promote the value and the status of the social care workforce. We've also got something to do about explaining what social care is, and I think it's vital we talk about what social care is and what social care could be as well, and not continually use negative terms, which sometimes is how it's kind of portrayed.
There's like a perceptual issue with it as well.
There is a perceptual issue. There is the funding disparity. However, the funding disparity is obviously different because of the way money goes centrally into the NHS, as opposed to some money goes centrally and some money is dispersed, and government would say through local authority fee structures.
Yeah. Okay. And the next one is, we're in November at the moment, and there's an election, and there's also the pending issue of Brexit. What, if any, impact do you think that Brexit will have on social care?
We know that now that Brexit's having some impact on recruitment and some impact on retention. So there are some issues there based on some of the decisions about that. I think it's too early to call, depending on what deals are actually achieved on kind of the wider issues. What I'd say is we've got 122,000 vacancies at any given time. Any further issues that are negative will just increase that vacancy rate.
Yeah, okay. And the other one is, well, I'd love to ask, why aren't you staying on to be CEO of Skills for Care? But I won't ask that because that's a little bit too prickly. But what would you?
It's not prickly, and I think it's
Okay.
important because I wrote a letter to my future CEO publicly and put it out there. So I've been in Skills for Care for 20 years. I'm 61. I love my substantive job, which is one of the directors that leads on the leadership and management and standards learning qualifications and other parts. We call it the operations directorate now. So I absolutely love that job. 2-3 years ago, I had cancer. It's kind of fatigued me a bit. I absolutely love what I'm doing as the interim CEO because I've got 200 folk who are brilliant, but I kind of want to go back and I want somebody else to come in and take us in, to new exciting directions.
Yeah, that's fair enough. And so for the new incoming, this might be in your letter that you wrote, I don't know, but for the new incoming CEO, what do you think are the qualities that are most important for the role? Maybe you could just name a few.
Yeah, to be able to listen, to be able to reflect, to be able to think innovatively. I think it's crucial that, some of my colleagues will cringe when they hear me say this, that we need to offer thought leadership around workforce. We need to think dynamically. We need to go out there and challenge assumptions about social care and social care workforce. So the ability to speak on behalf of the sector is something I think we'll be looking for. I and lots of my colleagues do that, and to have a CEO to kind of continue to join what previous CEO had kind of created is something I think we'd all welcome.
Yeah, I think I totally agree with those qualities. And just to finish off that one, do you think it's important for people who are in social care leadership roles to have had experience of working on the ground? So whether you're in commissioning or whether you are in a director role or whether you are CEO of Skills for Care, do you have to have had that experience at some point in your career on the ground?
It helps as long as you can use that experience positively. I kind of don't buy into the all experience is good if you spend your whole time saying, well, we didn't do it like that in my day, because the world has moved on. The world has moved on massively. So some of the things that was absolutely right and proper for me to do in the late 70s would not be right and proper now, because our learning and our development has moved on. So I think experience helps. However, I know there are some absolutely fantastic leaders across health and social care who've not been a direct care worker. What's crucial, and it goes back to my previous answer, is people need to listen, to reflect, to learn, to be compassionate and understand those issues. So for me, it's absolutely helped. I'm not sure it would automatically help everybody if they're not able to kind of learn and kind of move on.
That's really helpful to think about. I'm just going to throw in one more question.
Lots of cacti coming in here.
There are, actually. This isn't so much a cacti one. I'm just reflecting on what you said before about care and digital and the new developments within health and social care. And I think I saw Skills for Care was one of the people who were involved in digital social care, the new website that's been set up to help in this area. Do you think that social care is ill-equipped for this digital revolution that's happening? You could call it that, in social care, where we're getting rid of paper, that we're doing everything a slightly different way, that there's more emphasis on data. Do you think that the sector, considering it's made up of very small employers, is well equipped for that change?
No, I wouldn't say that. I'd say it's patchy. So there will be patches where employers might not be as knowledgeable and aware. in their defence, broadband's an issue. I could take you to parts of the country, and sometimes that's in cities as well as in rural areas where broadband doesn't allow some of the technologies. We've got a wealth of examples of absolutely fantastic use of digital, from small, medium enterprises to large. But we also know there are some deserts as well. Would we expect an understanding of digital to be a kind of skill of workers going forward? Absolutely. I'd actually expect the ability to learn to be a skill, really, and social care has to be a constantly learning profession. Because ideas change, new learning comes in, and we need to kind of continue to take that forward.
Yeah, that's really good. Thank you. So I think we'll close off there. Thank you so much for coming down, Andy. Now, say that I've listened to this or I've watched this on YouTube, and I'm really interested in what you have to say, and I want to follow you somehow. Do you have a blog, or are you on Twitter maybe? People can follow you.
Yeah, so I'm on Twitter at Andy Tilden SFC, I think.
That's fine, we'll put it in the description.
On Twitter, I'm on LinkedIn as well. I periodically write blogs. We have an e-news, a fortnightly e-news, and we can put the details there so people can sign up. No obligation to the e-news, and any blogs we put out will be on there as well. And indeed, I've kind of got an open email, so if people want to email me about some specific questions or anything I've said, I'm very happy to hear of people's thoughts.
That's very open of you, thank you. So I think we'll just close it off there. Thank you so much for listening in or watching to us on YouTube for CoProduce Care Chat. And if you want more information, then we'll put a lot of information on the description of this video. And just lastly, just to say thank you very much, Andy. It's been great talking to you.
I've enjoyed it. Thank you.
Great.